Hi everyone, Kate Copper here to talk to you about the SCORE discussion, which is coming up very soon. The SCORE discussion is a formal class dialogue surrounding the text of Fun Home. And so I'll be walking you through how to prepare for the SCORE discussion, some of the aims that we have for this discussion, and a little bit about how we will evaluate your participation in the SCORE discussion. So I will share my screen to kind of walk you through the aims and preparation. So our goals for this SCORE discussion include creating an environment where your participation is valued. We want you to develop engaging questions. There's a craft to developing really good questions, and this is part of what we're asking you to practice because it's an essential component of participating in class discussion. We're looking for constructive responses to each other's questions, and we're looking to see your ability to involve others through civil discourse. And we talked about civil discourse last week. And so this is your chance to really show how you can engage with civil discourse about some very complex ideas. We're also seeking an expansion of understanding through dialogue. It is through the engagement with each other in dialogue that some forms of knowledge really come into full fruition. It's an important distinction to understand the difference between dialogue and debate. We're not engaging in a debate in this SCORE discussion. A debate is where you have two sides that are largely concerned with their own position. Here, we're more concerned with questions and understanding each other's position in hopes that it will lead to an expansion of understanding. We're also here to challenge ideas with that same aim for understanding. Ultimately, this leads to a deeper connection to the text, in this case, Fun Home, and the concepts within Fun Home. And we're also expecting accountability for the success of this classroom discussion. So the first step would be to generate some really good discussion questions. And so part of your daily reflection or daily response is to develop some of these higher order thinking questions that will be good starting points for the SCORE discussion. We're looking for a distinction between higher order and lower order questions because those higher order questions really lead to the kinds of divergent thinking that we are aiming for in this kind of dialogue. So some sample question stems that you can play around with might include things like, what are the implications for, or why is this idea important, or what is another way to look at this concept? So what are the elements of a SCORE discussion? First of all, I talked about preparation. You need to develop some really good questions about the text. And these questions are going to indicate a purposeful engagement with Fun Home. You're going to, we as faculty are going to pass our ownership of the class discussion to you. We are not going to be a part of this SCORE discussion. It really rests on you and your ideas and your words. And we're aiming to model good listening, speaking, and facilitation skills in the SCORE discussion. So here's what the implementation is going to look like. It's going to maybe be a little different for different types of modalities. Some of you are online, some of you are in person. So I'm going to maybe talk a little bit about what you might expect depending on your modality. So your preparation of higher order questions is already going to begin. The classroom configuration will be a little bit different if you're face-to-face. We'll have a fishbowl model if you're all in the class together, where half of you will be in the center and the other half will be on the outside circle observing. If you are on Zoom, half of you will have your microphones on, the other half will have them off. Those of you on the outside circle or with your microphones off, you will be taking observation notes, sort of as if you were taking minutes for a meeting. You'll write down your observations of the SCORE discussion. You'll identify the common themes that percolate up to the top in the conversation. And on the faculty members' part, they're going to know when it's maybe necessary to step in, because as I mentioned before, faculty members are going to stay out of the SCORE discussion, but there may need to be reason for a faculty member to step in if there is a disruption in the classroom discussion norms that you've established, or if there's other kinds of reasons for faculty to step in. But beyond that, really, this is your show, and student engagement is what we're expecting here. And at the end of the SCORE discussion, there will be a debrief. We will all review observation notes, and there is a rubric for evaluation of the SCORE discussion. So implementation, very generally speaking, just to give you a visual of what to expect, half of the class is going to be on the inside and half the class will be on the outside. Cutting through this very quickly because your instructor will take care of this part. If online, half of you will be, as I mentioned, on with your microphones on, and the second group will turn off the microphones as well as the cameras, so as to put the focus on those who are speaking in that first round of discussion. I'm going to skip over this because this really has more to do with what the instructors are going to do, but some things that I will highlight here. You might note that each cycle is going to be about 40 minutes. So you're going to be prepared to talk with your peers for 40 minutes for the first round, and then another 40 minutes for the second round. The general guidelines that you will want to follow in our SCORE discussion is that you are responsible for the success of the discussion. If people are silent, people are silent. And sometimes that silence is going to be awkward, but that's okay. It's okay for there to be awkward silence. Eventually, someone will throw a ball and somebody will speak. So just know that if there's awkward silence, that is okay. That's part of our process for thinking, and that's part of how we're going to generate the next idea. Another guideline is that you should ask for clarification. If there's a concept that you don't fully understand, or if there's some terminology that's being used that isn't quite clear to you, it's your responsibility to ask for clarification. Another really big important part is that you are going to refer to the text and the topic at hand. You should have your Fun Home texts available to you. You should have them highlighted. You should have Post-it notes in them so that you can refer to page numbers. All in all, you earn more credit if you can refer specifically to passages in the texts. Another point is that you want to pull any tangents back to the main ideas. So digressions of conversation are great. Sometimes they lead us down alleyways that are kind of important and intriguing, but it's also really important that we get back on track and focus on the concepts in Fun Home. We want to be careful not to monopolize. I know I have this difficulty sometimes that I, like to hear what I have to say, but I need to put a check on myself and make sure that I'm asking other people to join the conversation. And a reminder that we're seeking to expand ideas, we're seeking to dig deep into complex thoughts, and we're also seeking to gain new perspectives. We don't want to stay in the same place. We want to end up with a different understanding that we entered the conversation from. We want to move beyond opinions and simple facts. This would be a very superficial treatment of this very complex text. And so moving beyond simple statements like, I really like, or I really dislike, and this is something that happened, into something that's a little bit more deep. And the development of really good questions will allow you to do that. And a reminder just to remember your norms for civil discussion that you've established in your in your classes. So in the first round, your professor will take minutes. Possibly they will record the discussion. And you as observers will highlight some themes and topics that maybe you want to return to when you pull back together as the full group, or perhaps in the second round. If there's silence, a reminder to let the silence sit. The faculty member will not intervene if there is silence. This is the student's scored discussion. This is your scored discussion. Faculty members will intervene, on the other hand, if the norms are violated, if there are hateful comments or personal attacks. Faculty members absolutely will intervene in that case. If you are in the outside circle, you should observe and take notes, as I've mentioned. I recommend the 2-column approach, where you have themes about the text and observations and a highlight of the quality of the discussion. Whereas on the right-hand side, you might have more specific notations. Another variation is you might just focus in on one participant, and that way you can focus your attention and see, what kinds of thoughts are generated from that individual. After 40 minutes, you'll switch. The second round, the same thing over again. And then at the end of both 40-minute rounds, all of you will get back together. If you're in class together, you'll pull your desks and tables together into a larger circle. Social distancing rules apply. Or if you're online, all your microphones and cameras will come back on so you can have a concluding conversation. In the debrief, you will be asked to identify the themes from the discussion. You'll be asked what kinds of questions or comments were the most interesting, what generated the most thoughtful responses, and what came up for you that you hadn't considered before. I guarantee you there will be some kind of idea that you had not ever thought of, and that will be interesting to talk about. You will also be asked to evaluate the quality of the discussion. Without naming names, what were some of the effective strategies that you noticed some of your peers using? And what were some of the less effective strategies? Were there any distractions? Were there any ways that the conversation could have been more deep? Did people move too quickly so that you didn't really interrogate an idea as well as it probably could have or should have been? And then you will all turn in your observation notes, either by email or whatever modality your professor would prefer. And your professor will use your notes to corroborate their evaluation of you as an individual. Finally, I realize that I'm at the end of the slides here, so I'm going to stop sharing. Finally, there is a score discussion rubric that will be shared with you, and I can pull that up in just a moment, but you should take a look at the rubric to see how you will be evaluated. It's not worth a whole lot of points, but I think this is a place where many of you could really shine, and we do expect you all to do quite well, because in your future classes here at Cornell, you will be expected to engage in classroom discussion and with an eye for civil discourse. Going to pause for a second to pull up that rubric for you. All right, so this is the score discussion that will be used to evaluate your participation. You will notice on the left, that's the lower level of participation, and then to the right is a higher level, more highly engaged level of participation. This is what we call a holistic rubric, which means that there might be some characteristics in some categories and other characteristics in some other levels. So for example, I might have contributed some relevant verbal contribution to the dialogue, although my contributions may have been superficial, while at the same time, I did a really good job in attempting to engage in productive dialogue. Or perhaps I have had some success at moving the conversation along by inviting new topics or posing new questions. So ultimately, you may exhibit characteristics from all of these levels. Your score will be based on your overall performance and the consistency of these observed characteristics. And so detailed descriptions on your participation is on the second page, and you should have access to this. So you might want to take some time to look over some of the descriptors of a very accomplished discussant in this kind of dialogue. And that's really what you are trying to achieve. When you get feedback, you're going to get some highlights from some of the features that you exhibited during the conversation, and then your score will be translated accordingly. And I think that's all I have to share on the score discussion. I look forward to my own class's discussion on Fun Home, and I'm sure that you are going to have a lot of shared wisdom soon to come. Have a good afternoon, and I will see you in the hallways. Bye-bye.